I was reading a great conversation between Sri Ramakrishna and a doctor that was treating the cancer that he had in his throat. And as I was kind of contemplating it and thinking about it, I started taking other spiritual truths that I've learned and heard from teachers and applying it to this particular teaching to see if it affected the teaching at all. And so I wanted to share that with you because it was kind of fun and brought some interesting things to light. And so let's just jump into it. Ramakrishna is speaking here. He says, as you go nearer to God, you see less and less of his upadis, or his attributes. A devotee at first may see the deity as the 10-armed Divine Mother. When he goes nearer, he sees her possessed of 6 arms, and still nearer, he sees the deity as the 2-armed Gopala. The nearer he comes to the deity, the fewer attributes he sees. At last, he comes to the presence of the deity. He sees only light without any attributes. You know, he's talking about the arms there just as a symbol of these ideas of God having attributes. And the fact that our notion of God changes as we grow, obviously, because we're using a mind in order to perceive something. And so the coloring of the mind affects the coloring of the objects it's thinking about, or the ideas that it's thinking about. And there were 2 things that were important to me about this. Was one, if the mind is impure, you're going to project those impurities on the divine. If you have wrong ideas about yourself or about existence, when you think about the divine or the true ideal or the highest ideal, it's going to be tainted by those ideas of self. And it will color the way you think of God. And God will seem unreasonable at times because it brings to light some of the unreasonable nature of your thinking, some of the contradictory ideas that you hold about yourself that don't work in an ideal form. But what I was more interested in is this idea of God growing and changing, seemingly, as you grow and change, or as your mind releases these ideas of me and mine. Because the truth that I'm applying or wanted to apply to this idea was that the ultimate truth of spirituality is that God and you are one, meaning that there's actually no you. At some point, as you mature as a spiritual entity, your ego I that is identified with particulars and with body-mind, with upadis, with attributes, that in time those fall away through deep practice and deep meditation and realizations, understandings about yourself that are very subtle as you go inside and you see these layers of self. And you analyze along the lines of some of our other videos and come to this knowledge that most of this is illusory. Most of it is happening in a mind, that there is no internal and external. And as you grow in these ideas, your idea of self drops off the attributes. You begin to understand, I'm not male nor female. I don't have an age. I cannot be changed by conditions or environment. That there's a universal constant within that has remained unchanged through all of my life. And its subtle nature is love and intelligence and being, which we've talked about ad infinitum. But you see here how the idea of God's attributes falling off is in parallel with the idea of your attributes falling off as you grow and as you practice, until you reach that stage where you realize that that which is you is simply a light of love without attribute, a universal well-being, a universal well-wishing, as it were. You have to come down a little bit to put the sense of others in there. But you see how you add teachings together to get hints and clues about your own practice and about your own ways of thinking and understanding. And this is the reason that we dedicate ourselves to these practices, because these truths, if they're real, they're amazing, they're overwhelming, they're unbelievable, actually. Quite literally, they're unbelievable. How can that possibly be? But you throw yourself into your practice, so that you can understand, not as a philosophy and not as a religion, but as life, as you, as being, as your experience and relationship to everything. you come to this notion of light, infinite, immortal, ever free, pure, blissful, content, never hungry, never needy. These things are your nature, they're your birthright. What can you do but go find them, uncover them, search for them? What else could be more important in this life? Everything you eat goes away. Everything that you acquire falls apart. Everything that you own eventually goes into a will. What in life is more important than knowing your nature, of knowing this experience of what you are, of who you are, especially when the sages say that it ends in a flash of light, of love beyond understanding, a peace that is deep and abiding and beyond reason, a self whose stability and strength cannot be touched by condition. It's an exciting thing to me. I think that's amazing. He goes on to say, listen to a little of some Vedantic reasoning. A magician came to a king to show his magic. When the magician moved away a little, the king saw a rider on horseback approaching him. He was brilliantly arrayed and had various weapons in his hand. The king and the audience began to reason out what was real in the phenomena being presented before them. Evidently, the horse was not real. It had to be part of the magician's illusion. Somehow the robes couldn't be real. The armor and weapons couldn't be real. At last they found out, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the rider alone was there. The significance of this is that Brahman alone is real and the world is unreal. Nothing whatsoever remains if you analyze. So this magical world, this conjuring that we live in, is the play of a very mischievous divine entity. At one point in spiritual thought, of course, we know he becomes only light with no attribute as the two of you dance closer and closer to the same dance until the illusions of the magic fall away and you see only yourself everywhere, in all things. All of your senses are only presenting your highest nature back to yourself. And all of the joys and little bits of enjoyment and ecstasies that you've collected over the years were just little teaspoonfuls of what your true nature is, little tastes of what lies at the apex of understanding, at the apex of knowing. So practice hard, find your way, uncover these things. We need so many people in this world who are dedicated to this ideal of pure love, unselfishness, service, and caring. It's going to take hard work. It's going to take a lot of risk, taking a lot of chances, trusting some things that might not seem so obvious at first, and having the courage to accept the things that you see and witness as your spiritual life grows.